Good evening, everybody. This is Marty from Dawgs blog. Tonight's report, and I do have a little bit of a cough. I apologize. I cannot pause this live feed that I'm doing, so I may cough a little bit. But I'm much, much better now. I appreciate everybody's support and what's going on. The afternoon session, Eddie Quintanar was still on the stand, but before I get to that, I want to read a comment that was put on Dawgs blog's notification. That's on my Facebook page, notification page. That's a group page that I made for Dawgs blog. And Kevin Pickett made a comment, and I want him to understand. I understand the passion. Kevin Pickett made a comment. It was a very respectful comment. He wants to talk about, these defendants aren't the victims, and he wants us to stop talking about. Let me read it and let you decide for yourself. Kevin Pickett, would you please tell the positive things, or at least give my son as a human the fact there is a possibility that the people could be responsible for the murder of my son. This is all one long sentence. You come off one-sided in this case. My son is a victim, not popping cork. The brothers or anyone else in this unsolvable case, which I think is very interesting the way he wrote that. I see your side of certain things, but I just get tired of the one side of your opinion in this case. All I want is the people to pay for the crime. You or anyone else cannot tell me that all this blank bullshit and the district attorney's office and the police department and all the witnesses they have cannot be involved in my son's murder, and these defendants, all top-notch people of society. It's not far to my son. It's fair to my son. Thank you, Kevin Pickett. Now, I did write a response, and I said, Kevin, I report what is said in court, and that is it. If you do not like it, quit reading the blog or listening to the podcast. I understand, Kevin, I'm talking to you personally here, man to man. I understand your passion. I understand you had somebody close to you that you lost. The information that I put out is what it is. The DA has done a very poor job in this case. They never did in this case what they were supposed to do. No one from the district attorney's office did. They are doing a poor job in the courtroom. I just want you to understand this, that you're not going to get justice for Corey in this case. And I apologize personally for that, even though there's nothing I can do about it. It was poorly done. This thing was the investigation was poorly run. It was ran with, in my opinion, it was ran with an agenda, and that's all there is to it. This is not about justice for Corey Kaufman, and it should be. If Corey was actually a victim of a homicide, he deserves justice. I don't care who he was. And I agree with you on that. But the problem is the way this thing has been done, they don't even have a cause of death. You probably, to be honest with you, Kevin Pickett, you probably know more about this than anyone else because you lived with him. You knew that the problems were involved with that is. You knew the problems that were involved with hanging out with the people that he hung out with, like Michael Cooley and such of those guys over there. So it is what it is. What I put out on here, it is what it is. What Tom puts out there, it is what it is. We're entitled to our opinion, just as you are. You can come on here and express yourself anytime you want, as long as you're respectful like you just were. And I will post anything that you write if that's what you want to do. If anybody else has a problem with what we're writing, and I make this offer to everybody, you got a problem with what we're writing, don't like it, come to court, write a report, what you see in court every day, do an honest report. No matter what you say, I'll put it up. I'll post it on my website. If you don't like what we're doing, step up and come in here and have somebody do it themselves. That's what you should be doing if you don't like what I'm doing. And I promise you, I will put your reports up on my site It's plain and simple. So that's it, Kevin. I respect. I talked to you a little bit at the court one day. I respect you. You seem like a pretty straightforward guy. So it is what it is. And this case sucks. And there's no reason for this preliminary hearing in this thing to go 18 months. It's a joke. There's no reason for this trial to still be going on right now, because this thing should have been over a month or two ago. They were estimating 5 to 6 months. We're in our 8th month now. So it is what it is. The DA is still putting on her case 8 months later, and I'm talking about opening arguments. The trial actually started when they started jury selection back in January, but I'm talking about from opening arguments. So that's it is what it is. I wanted to address you directly because I appreciate what you might be going through. The whole family, I appreciate what you could be going through. I'm not saying it's got to be tough and stuff. So I'm telling you, if anybody wants to come in and write a report, I'll put it on my site. As simple as that. And I do respect what you have to say. So anyway, anybody has any comments they want to make, come to Facebook, make a comment on my here. Make a comment and a personal comment and a personal message. Make a comment on Dawgs Blog's notification on Dawgs Blog's Facebook page. So, and I'll get those messages. I have the window open in front of me. Okay, let's get back to today's activities. The jury came up around 1:39 this afternoon. Judge was on the bench at 1:40, so it wasn't too bad getting started this afternoon. Marlissa Ferreira was still doing direct on Eddie Quintanar, and she was asking him in regards to Scott McFarland's weapons that he may have had at Poppencork. He says he was aware of a hunting rifle. He thinks it was a .270 caliber rifle. He didn't recall talking about any other guns with Scott McFarland being at Poppencork or anything else. He never discussed a .22 caliber rifle. Apparently there was a Ruger .22 caliber rifle that somebody had. I'm not sure if it was McFarland or it was Otwell or both. I don't know. Hold on. Somebody sent me a message. Nope, nobody did. He never saw the rifle, .22 caliber rifle, and never saw any .22 caliber ammunition at the Poppencork. In regards to the .32 caliber that he said that Daljeet Atwal had, he said it was a semi-automatic pistol. He saw it earlier, but he's not sure when he saw it. It was in a holster, and it wasn't on Daljeet Atwal's body. It wasn't in a holster on his belt or his ankle or anything like that. He didn't know if he actually carried the .32 caliber. He didn't know if he carried more than one gun at a time. He could carry one in a hip holster or belt holster, and he could carry one on his ankle because he did have an ankle holster apparently for a 9mm. He did see the ankle holster in the store around January of 2012. He didn't know if Daljeet Atwal was working with the ankle holster with a .32 caliber or what it was. He wasn't sure for which weapon the holster was for. He did see the Glock 27 in an ankle holster, and he didn't know if it was the same holster or not. But there was the Glock 27, which is a .40 caliber. He did carry sometimes in an ankle holster. He was not aware of anybody carrying a gun on the hip or the belt, along with carrying a gun in the ankle holster, carrying two guns at once. Daljeet Atwal was never seen carrying or holding a .32 caliber. He was asked if on March 31st, 2012, he got a call from Daljeet Atwal. Eddie Quintanar did not recall whether he did or not. You got to remember that was 6 years ago. He was asked how long the call lengths were when he had conversations with Daljit Atwal. He said on an average probably 13 to 15 minutes. She asked, Marlissa Ferreira then asked him if the 13-minute call is a lengthy call. And he just said they lasted 10 to 15 minutes. So he said, no, that was an average call. Sometimes I don't understand the questioning, but what do I know? I'm an idiot. He first knew about the missing person case. He couldn't recall when he first knew about this. And a lot of this was when he was being interviewed by Kurt Bunch and John Evers in 2015. He knew when Walter Wells' father was dying. He was asked if Walter Wells went to Poppincork prior to his father dying. He said no. He talked about, and he was asked if he talked about being at Poppincork, asking Walter Wells if he was at Poppincork. He said no, he didn't talk to him about it. And apparently this was a conversation that he was having at the CHP office. He was asked if he had a long conversation with Walter Wells after the search warrant. He didn't recall having a long conversation. And then she asked him, "Did you tell law enforcement that you?" And she's talking about the interview with Bunch and Evers. Tell law enforcement a long conversation that he had with Walter Wells. He said he didn't recall. He wasn't sure what he had told them. Did he discuss that Bobby and Dee were being investigated? He said, yeah, they did have a conversation. Again, that was at the CH office one day while they were working. And this, he said he believed, but he wasn't 100% on these dates. I mean, you remember, again, that was 6 years ago. He said it was after the search warrant was served. He talked to Daljit Atwal asked if he talked to Daljit Atwal about the investigation. And the investigators coming to Poppincork. And Marlissa Ferreira actually asked him if it was the detectives that came and talked to him. And he said, Daljit said it was investigators. So there was a distinction there somehow. Daljit said the investigators had come. He couldn't remember what his responses were to that. He never, Eddie Quintanar never knew Corey Kaufman, had never saw him prior to him going missing. He learned that Corey Kaufman was missing through Scott McFarland. And Scott McFarland said that Corey Kaufman was his neighbor. Judge Aniga, at this point, there was a lot of objections going on the way the questions were being asked. Judge Aniga, again, in front of the jury, admonishes Marlissa Ferreira for leading questions again. And she told her to stop. She admonished her for doing that and told her to stop doing it. It's something that she has repeatedly had to do in front of the jury and tell Marlissa to stop leading questions. The interview with Kurt Bunch and John Evers, I think there was two of them. This one they're talking about now is on March 24th, 2015. She asked if he told Kurt Bunch that Scott McFarland said his neighbors were all a bunch of thieves. He didn't say one thief. And Eddie Quintanar clarified that. He didn't say one thief. He said a bunch of thieves. Marlissa was trying to narrow it down to just Corey Kaufman, but he said they were all thieves. He didn't recall if that was prior to March 30th to 2012. He was shown the transcript of the interview. And Eddie Quintanar had a kind of funny look on his face. It seemed like he did, I don't know for sure, but it seemed like it appeared to me that he was thinking that's not what he said. What was in the transcript or in the report, whatever he was reading, was not what he said. He wanted to listen to the recording itself. So Marlissa Ferreira had to queue up. They actually ended up sending the jury out at 2:20. She said there were two transcripts actually on the interview. There was one by the DA's office that was 170 pages, and one by the CHP that was 130 pages. So there was two interviews actually. One was with Kurt Bunch, John Evers, and one was by the CHP investigators. So she was trying to figure out the spot on the recording to get to exactly where the transcript was, the area that they were talking about. He did listen to that during the break, and so the jury was out from 2:20 to 3:13. So the jury was out, 53 minutes. Again, Marlisa Ferreira went back to her direct with Eddie Quintanar. During the break, he listened to the recording. He said it did refresh his memory. He was speculating at the time, trying to feel it out, filling in the gaps. He says that's what he was doing when he was talking to Kurt Bunch and John Evers, that he was speculating. When Scott McFarland said what he said about his neighbors. Remember, that was at least 6 years ago. He made some statements, but he said they're probably speculation. Marlisa objected to his response is, yes, that's what I said. Then he went on to clarify it, that it was probably speculation. She objected to the last part as non-responsive. And he repeatedly said that on some of these questions that he was speculating. And DA kept objecting, moving to strike the latter part of the sentence. She heard what she wanted to hear, and then the rest of it she wanted to strike. Marlisa Ferreira asked if Scott McFarland, D, and Eddie Quintanar, and maybe Walter Wells were part of that conversation. And he wasn't sure about Walter Wells. He really wasn't sure about when the conversation was made, or whether it was actually made a popping cork or not. But that's what Marlisa is trying to get across to the jury. Scott McFarland said that thieves had lived next door and wished they would move out. And she asked him if anyone talked about Mike Cooley. He said it never came up. He heard Frank Carson's name in regards to the Robert Woody case, but was not sure exactly who he heard it from. It might have been Robert Woody himself. And he said it might have been around 2010 when he heard Frank Carson's name. Robert Woody said Frank Carson represented him. Then he said that might have been around 2011. They were refreshing with transcript again. And the investigators did tell Eddie Quintanar the date that Corey Kaufman went missing. The defense was objecting to this, and Judge Iniga kept telling them to hold on. She wouldn't even listen to their objections. The DA kept asking the dates and the homicide, this and that and this and that. Talking about the dates, talking about the homicide, kept answering the question over and over again. Finally, they had to go to a sidebar. Judge Zuniga told apparently, this is what I learned later on by Judge Zuniga's statements, that Judge Iniga advised her not to use those dates because it's in question of those dates. It's up to the jury to decide. It's in question whether there was actually a homicide. It's up to the jury to decide. They came back from the sidebar after in fact, the judge said that she had to shoo Marlisa Ferreira away from the sidebar because she was copying the attitude that she usually gets. She turned around and immediately asked about the homicide date of 3/30/2012. Again, It led up to more objections. It was kind of an ongoing thing. Jai Gohel kept saying that he has a motion to make. The judge told him, wait, hold on. I think that's a really poor way of handling a situation when you have an attorney wanting to make a motion in a serious case like this. But what do I know? So, again, Eddie was refreshing with the transcript of the investigation, talking about there was a CHP investigator's interview on September of 2015. He said that Scott McFarland told more than one person about the neighbors. It was he said it would happen at work. It probably happened at Poppin Cork too. Marlissa Ferrer asked him if he was working on March 28, 2012. He said, no, I'm not sure, but I don't think so. March 29th, March 30th, March 31st, and he said no to all of those. So then she came up with his timesheets for those days, and she went back to the 27th and showed the time cards, and he was not working any of those days. On the 27th, he was on vacation. The 28th, the 29th, 30th, and the 31st this is March of 2012. They were all regular days off. She started asking about the Kurt Bunch, John Evers interview again, and asked about the homicide. She said they asked about the homicide, actually. The jury was finally sent out at 3:47 for the day because they had to deal with this issue. And Marlissa Ferrer keeps using these dates in that term homicide when she has been told not to, and turn around and immediately does it again. So the jury was sent out for the day. Jai Gohel had a motion. The DA, he was saying that DA, in a sidebar, the DA was ordered to stay away from the homicide talk. He asked for a mistrial. The court has warned her not to do that, and she continues to use the phrase homicide and use the date in other things like that. She was told not to do either, apparently, and she continued to do it. In fact, did it immediately after told not to. Percy Martinez argued Marlissa Ferrer repeatedly used the homicide term after being told not to do that in the sidebar. Kurt Bunch is trying to feed information to the witness in this transcript, in this interview, in the transcript. And Marlissa Ferrer is trying to put that information to the jury. From the information that from Kurt Bunch to the jury, he says that's misconduct. He said Marlissa Ferrer argued that she used the 3/30 of 2012 date and using the transcript words. She's very good at this. She is very good at doing things like this, doing exactly what she's not told, but able to try to work her way out of it. She's very good at that. And she said she was reading Kurt Bunch's report in the transcript, trying to get the information in what happened. And he was asking about the before and after of the homicide. She said that Quintanar said he didn't know Corey Kaufman, but Marlissa Ferrer said he did know, and he was lying to the officers. So she's accusing Quintanar of lying to the officers in this interview and also lying on the stand right now. Asking about the homicide is not misconduct, not what they were talking about in the sidebar. And Judge got that squishy look on her face when she said that. Attorney Hans argued the question itself states facts. The DA is trying to get into the jury with the term murder. She's trying to convince the jury, if you say it enough times, it becomes true, the term murder. The way she is asking, Hans said, is improper. Again, Percy Martinez argued what was important was the 3/30/12, the 2012 date. The DA concluding was a homicide on March 30th of 2012. And Kurt Bunch she was reading Kurt Bunch's statements and questions that in questions to the witness, but so that's getting it to the jury. The objections were sustained when she did that. She continued to do that. The information was from Kurt Bunch. The information was not from Eddie Quintanar. This was Kurt Bunch's statements, not Quintanar's statements. It is unknown if it is a homicide. Cannot repeat Kurt Bunch's statements. Now, when they say it's unknown if it's a homicide, they don't know what Corey Kaufman died of. There wasn't enough of the remains to make a determination. He could have died of a drug overdose, for anyone knows. He could have been stabbed. They think he was shot. Now they're trying to say it was a different caliber bullet midstream here. Marlissa Ferreira argued she did not use 3/30 of 2012. Well, I heard her use it. Kurt Bunch was asking Quintanar everything before the date. If the conversations he was having with McFarland and such was before the date, or was it after the homicide? She again keeps saying homicide. That is not what the defense is now arguing. She can ask what questions that she wants, and the response was she will prove that he was lying, meaning Quintanar. Marlissa Ferreira said she can impeach him with his own words. But those weren't his words. Those were Kurt Bunch's words. Hans argued very briefly, said just because a question was asked does not mean it was okay to be asked. Jai Gohel argued Marlissa Ferreira has repeatedly used the homicide term over and over again. There is no cause of death. There would be no pathologist testifying on what Corey Kaufman died of or anything along that lines. Jai Gohel also mentioned that in 25 years as an attorney, he's never seen anything like this type of representation been done in court. Marlissa Ferreira says the same thing about all the defense attorneys too. Marlissa Ferreira says the body was buried at Poppenkork, where it was dumped after being shot. Quintanar says he doesn't know anything about this guy. She's saying that he's lying, and then the body was moved to the mountains. She says everything is argument. She says it's not misconduct. She can ask what the interviewers what was said during the interview. The dragging out of this case that the defense keeps contending is due to the defense constantly asking for a mistrial. Okay. And that is what's going to drag this case out even longer, the way they're... And Jai Gohel says, in fact, Marlissa Ferreira and Jai Gohel were actually going back and forth at each other in this. And he said he was asking for a mistrial with prejudice. So that means, he said that means 3 innocent people could go home. He said the district attorney's office is trying to just wear down the jury to get a mistrial. Finally, Judge Aniga just looks at both of them and said, "You guys done?" And she says the record reflects that Marlissa Ferreira asked well, I'm having trouble reading my own writing here. The record reflects that Marlissa Ferreira did ask what the investigator said and did give the date and did give the homicide term. And again, she was the investigators kept referring to that particular date, so that's what she was reading. She was told not to read that, but she continued to say that the March 30th, 2012 date, right after she had a sidebar, was told not to. And then she turned right around and did the homicide term also. She said at the sidebar, Marlissa Ferrer, she can put it in a timeline. Q was having trouble remembering, and so she can put it in a timeline. And she did note that Marlissa Ferrer got a little pissy with her at the sidebar when she ruled, and she walked away in a huff. Actually was told to walk away, and she walked away in a huff, and then immediately asked that question again that she was just told not to ask. So Judge Zuniga, who's turned out to be a jewel for the DA's office, she really got a winning lotto ticket with Judge Zuniga on this case with the things that she's allowed to get away with. There's no downside for her doing some of the things she's doing. Judge Zuniga constantly chastises her but doesn't do anything about it, so there's no downside for Marlissa Ferrer to do some of these things, like leading questions and say things she's not supposed to say. So Zuniga said that Marlissa asked about the 3/30/2012 date again. She said it was asked by investigators, but the objection was sustained. And then Marlissa Ferrer asked it again. The objection was sustained. So this went on three times, and throughout the questioning at that point. And she asked him, Eddie Quintanar, if he knew anything about the homicide. She said Judge Zuniga said something interesting at the point. She said there's a sufficient evidence that something happened to Corey Kaufman. But it took a long, long time for the district attorney's office to get it out in open court. It is a question of who did it. So Judge Zuniga is obviously convinced that there's been a homicide. That's fine. Okay. There is some evidence of the bullet holes in the jacket, but there's no evidence of anything with the remains. Judge Zuniga also noted that the relevance of the question is what the witness was saying, not the officers. And that's the point she was trying to get across to Marlissa Ferrer. She said there's a lot of confusion in the record of what actually the final what had actually happened. It's not real clear. It's open to interpretation. She says it's up to the jury, so that date and the homicide are not to be used. And then she chastised Marlissa Ferrer again. She told her not to use that date, and then she immediately went back to the table, and the first question he asked was about that date, March 30th of 2012. She was told not to do that. And the last question she asked was they wanted to know about a homicide, and that was the investigators talking to Quintanar. They're trying to find out Scott McFarland's involvement, so DA did ask proper questions after that. The point is, she didn't ask proper questions at the time, and that's the objections. And she wouldn't even let the defense attorneys get the objections out. She loves to let people make the record, but she wasn't even letting them do that. Jai Kelhel had to repeatedly say that he wants to make a motion, and she wouldn't even let him do that. saying that asking those questions, Marlissa Ferreira is asking those questions, is not a mistrial issue, though it should not be done. Well, if it should not be done, what kind of issue is it? I'm sorry. The DA's office caught a jewel. They really caught a jewel with Judge Zuniga. She also said that there's no excuse for Marlissa Ferreira's behavior, but she does nothing about it. She says there's no excuse, but does nothing about it. She says there is no excuse for her acting that way, but she doesn't do anything about it. There's no excuse for her asking constant leading questions, but doesn't do anything about it. So there's no downside for Marlissa Ferreira to do these things. She said motion denied. That was the end of the day. It was already about 4:20 or so, and so we got out of there. And I'm sorry, the district attorney's office really caught a break with getting Judge Zuniga on this case. She's very pro-prosecution and does not believe defense attorneys. And I know many attorneys, and I'm not talking about this case, many attorneys in many cases, and I'm not talking about specifically defense attorneys. I've seen a lot of attorneys play a lot of games in court. I see the games being played in court here, so take that for whatever you think it's worth. So that was the end of the day. Jury's coming back at 9 o'clock tomorrow. I also believe the judge mentioned something about Thursday is a half a day. The jury's not there in the morning. She's going with, I think she's going over those personnel files with the Attorney General Thursday morning. So Thursday the court will only be in session in the afternoon as far as the jury's concerned. That's all I got. Remember I have the buttons, the PayPal buttons on the bottom of each report. You can donate. You can change the number of units for $5 increments. How much you want to donate, it's up to you. Donations have been steady. I appreciate it. We're keeping this thing going. We're paying the last transcript. Just somebody said I should get more transcripts. So if something happens, I'm not there. We know what happened. The last transcript I bought was $227. So it can't always be done. It depends on how it's done. Is how much it costs. They're different, and it's hard to explain, but that's how it works. So I had to have it explained to me a couple of times. So it's not always easy to get those transcripts. It's easy to get the files, a filing or something that I can post. And they're 50 cents a page, but those aren't too bad. So, but the transcripts can get real expensive real quick. So remember my pay buttons on the bottom of each post. Remember my sponsors, Merced Tile Supply, and he's got some new stuff over there. He sent me some pictures of. I am going to get them up as soon as I can. And Doug Maynor, attorney at law at 15th and J in the old Masons building. So that's all I got. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to send me an email. Feel free to send me a message. Any way you want. Ask these questions, and other people I'm sure are thinking the same thing. Remember what I always said, don't take my word for it. Come to court and find out for yourself. Good night, everybody.